This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State agricultural economist Reid and Flinchbaugh Agricultural Policy Chair Jenny Ifft kick off today's show by discussing crop insurance and Title I options for wheat growers. Tawnie Larson, project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program at K-State, keeps the show rolling by reminding farmers about hearing and respiratory protection during harvest. Ending today's show is Riley County Extension Horticulture Agent Gregg Eyestone, covering the steps involved in overseeding cool season lawns. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our show talking about crop insurance and the wheat safety net with K-State agricultural economist Reid and Flinchbaugh Agricultural Policy Chair at K-State, Jenny Ifft. Robin, Jenny, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us on, Shelby.
Jenny, how are we first thinking about wheat budgets and everything for this year when it comes to finances and thinking about crop insurance?
Well, planting time is coming soon for wheat, winter wheat. That means there's a crop insurance deadline coming up on September 30th, so producers have to make some decisions. I just looked at our recently updated wheat budgets on AgManager.info, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's really not pretty. For all wheat types across the state, it looks like variable costs are running about 60 to 70% of expected returns. But for not a single one of them is anyone able to cover their fixed expenses. So nobody is projected to break even once you take into account all their costs. Now, these are average numbers, so everybody's situation is different. But what it says that a lot of people are just going to be getting by in 2025 for our wheat producers. And if somebody, does have lower costs, they're going to make money, but maybe not a lot. So it's going to be a tough go this year for sure.
Is this something that the wheat safety net could help with?
So there's two things that we want to talk about. One of them is your crop insurance that, again, you're making your selections before September 30th this year. And the other one are the Title I programs, so the ARC and PLC that producers are, used to as we've had those since the 2014 Farm Bill. So we want to talk today about just making those selections. And obviously the ARC and PLC is a little bit up in the air. Right now, we're looking at a likely extension of the 2018 Farm Bill, which would mean we would be making these decisions by March 15th of next year. But for wheat producers who are selecting their crop insurance, there's always that interaction between if you purchase the supplemental coverage option on your crop insurance, then you will not be able to enroll those base acres in the ARC program.
How would one go about weighing those different options with those tools?
In the past, we talked about crop insurance and protecting your profit margin, and this year it's more of a can you cover your costs type of situation. So again, the current projected price, crop insurance price for wheat is $5.76. They're still in price discovery till the middle of the month, but we are looking at crop insurance premiums that are probably going to be about $2 to $3 per acre less than last year, and that's just because of those lower prices. That's for your standard underlying revenue protection policy. Most farmers go with that option looking at about, 65%, 70%, 75% coverage level. For producers who do want to cover more of their expected revenue, supplemental coverage option, SCO, and the enhanced coverage option are available. They're both partially paid for by the federal government. If you go the supplemental coverage option route, it'll take your protection up to 86%. Those payoffs are going to be triggered by county yields. And if you had base acres with ARC, you can't use SCO. So that's where the program interaction gets in place. The other option, an enhanced coverage option, that can take you up to 90 or 95% coverage level. Again, those are county-based. One change is the subsidy levels for ECO are now the same as SCO. So there's going to be a lower cost to producers this year. It's still going to be a little bit more expensive than SCO because the higher coverage level you get, the more risk you have, the more likely you are to get a payout.
And Robin, what about stuff on that Title I ARC PLC side of things?
Well, it's, again, going to be a decision we will make next spring if we have extension of this farm bill. But assuming we do, really what producers are going to be looking at next spring For PLC, there's actually going to be a slight increase in the effective reference price. So we've been under $5.50 PLC, what we call strike price, since the 2014 Farm Bill. So if the marketing year average price for next year's wheat falls below $5.50 in a typical year, you would start getting a payment. Because of that price escalator that was actually built into the 2018 Farm Bill, we now have $5.56. So 6 cents difference, not really a huge deal, but just to make producers aware, last year our other commodities did escalate in price for our PLC guarantee. This year wheat will actually experience that as well. And that's just based off of the recent years of history. So wheat really didn't start coming up in price until 2022 when we hit the war situation in Ukraine. So again, PLC triggers based on the marketing year price. If it falls below $5.56, there will be a payment. Now the ARC County program, it's a moving average, so Olympic average of the previous 5 years. And so what I'm seeing as an ARC benchmark for next year's wheat, 2025 wheat, I'm seeing $6.72. So it's quite a bit higher than our PLC price. So because of that reason, I would anticipate a lot of producers are going to be interested in putting their wheat into the ARC County program. I know most producers know how to navigate this, but again, the ARC program is the one that also has the yield component. So there's a county yield that's established, and that is a revenue guarantee, much like crop insurance. So depending on if it's a lower county yield, obviously it's going to trigger quicker. If you have a better county yield, it's going to take more of a price loss to trigger a payment. As producers are thinking about their crop insurance decisions, also thinking about that ARC PLC, because again, I think a lot of wheat producers are going to want to look at that ARC County program next year, unless we really have wheat prices coming down, and that's where PLC tends to pay more in very low price situations because it does not max out until we hit a loan rate.
Jenny, what are some of the different risks that these programs cover?
So if you look at ARC and PLC, those are free. ARC's going to provide some additional revenue protection, so either low yields or low prices. PLC is going to provide that price protection, and it can pay out even when yields are high. SEO is quite similar to ARC, but you have to pay. One reason you might want to do it is if you want to get up to a higher coverage level, say like at 85% revenue protection, it's going to be a lot more cost effective than doing that with an individual policy. With your standard revenue protection policy, there's also the harvest price option. So if there is a drought, SEO can pay out at higher prices at harvest. There's one drawback with SEO, you can't use it with ARC. ECO is more flexible. Then you could use it with ARC or PLC. You don't have to worry about base acres. It does get a little bit more costly for that 95% ECO. It is such a high coverage level, though, if you think can price decline 5% to trigger a payment, over the course of the year. It can trigger a lot based on price. So in some ways it works like a put option, except when you have high yields, because it is a revenue product. So, if you had a big price drop, but the county has higher yields, it might not trigger. So it's going to provide some of the protection similar to a put, but not all of it.
Is there a good place for producers to go and look at all of these things and maybe see things in writing or have someone to go talk to about it?
So for the ARC and PLC decision, unfortunately, there's just not much out there yet. And wheat producers tend to fall into this, unfortunately, because of the time frame. Farm Service Agency won't put out a lot of numbers or anything, especially because we don't have an extension of this Farm Bill. And right now, the prices and things aren't going to be published because those programs may or may not be available. But, as far as the crop insurance decision, there are resources that we have on Ag Manager that would help with that.
Especially for those higher coverage policies, we have a lot of resources on AgManager.info to navigate those choices. Also, just, sitting down with your crop insurance agent early, there's a lot of different ways you can slice and dice it to sort of, manage those premium costs, which, it's going to really hurt this year. So, start early, work with your agent, and we also have resources for the higher coverage policies on AgManager.info.
One thing I'll chime in, too, just on those higher coverage policies, the SEO and the ECO, one thing producers haven't used in before that might get a little tricky is the timing of the payments. Yeah. when we have those coverage policies that go based on a county yield, that county yield is not actually released until June the following year. And so we'll be putting wheat in the ground here in Kansas very soon. We will obviously be harvesting that next summer. That's the start of the marketing year for the programs I just talked about. So there's like a year and a half lag in wheat production. Well, ECO and SEO, the higher coverage policy levels, have a similar issue. So when we harvest wheat next summer, that wheat yield at the county level will not be released till June of the following year, and that's when those payments will be received. Now, I think in the long run, both of these coverages have made money because of, as Jenny talked about, the 65% government subsidy on the premium. But as we get into these tough times, cash flow is going to be an issue. And when we're paying higher premiums and waiting a year and a half to where we might get a potential payment, that could very much be a cash flow issue. Even profitability-wise makes sense, but maybe feasibility-wise won't.
So we've mentioned the Farm Bill a couple of times. Any updates on how things are looking?
I think people are expecting an extension. A lame duck farm bill is not impossible, but there's not a lot of optimism that it's going to happen. Congress has never failed to pass an extension. We have not yet had to go back to 1949.
And to reassure our producers out there, crop insurance is permanently authorized. So that's why we can talk about this program is continuing no matter what happens with the Farm Bill. It's that ARC and PLC that would be kind of the question as we go forward.
That was K-State agricultural economist Robin Reid and Flinchbaugh agricultural policy chair at K-State, Jenny Ifft. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Thursday show thinking about safety this time of year in agriculture with project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program, Tawnie Larson. Tawnie, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Shelby. Thanks for having me.
Tawnie, what type of safety are we specifically wanting to think about this time of year in agriculture?
So there's a lot going on this time of year out in the fields. We have harvest and there's other field work as well. So this would be a really good time to become aware of some different safety hazards that are out there. I think today we might concentrate a little bit more on hearing safety and protection as well as respiratory system protection.
So as we focus towards hearing and respiratory, there are other concerns to think about, but just focusing on this today.
Yes, absolutely. We know you're really busy and it takes a lot to get everything going. So just maybe a little few tips here and there about how to be safe.
Looking into hearing, what maybe should farmers, producers think about when they're thinking how well they're protecting their ears?
So we think a lot about the different levels of noise, and there is high and low noise, and there's also just the volume of the noise and how loud things are. So it would be a good idea to think about how you can protect your hearing. Hearing loss is cumulative, and so one of the things we really worry about is how long you're exposed to different noises and how loud those are. And then what does that look like throughout your life? Because if you're exposed when you're really young, that's not really going to help you out much as you get older in age. So that's why we do see a lot of people that are older that have hearing loss if they've been around large machinery or equipment or animals, livestock, pigs are loud. So we need to just think about the different things that are in our surroundings.
And what's maybe a good key to thinking this equipment might be a little too loud?
So I think it's interesting how we use decibels. We all kind of know what that is, but because we've heard about it, but it's about the intensity of the sound. And so, for example, a refrigerator is at like 50 decibels. So that, we can hear our refrigerator humming in the background, but, kind of can ignore it. Whereas the conversation, just in general, if we're talking with someone, is about 60 decibels. But if you get into a busy restaurant, and that's a lot of times where we notice we're having difficulty hearing, that's at 70 decibels. And so as we move up every 10 decibels, it increases the sound 10 times. So, I got to 70 with a restaurant. Well, we get around some tractors, maybe running at 50% load, combines, blowers, they're around 90 decibels. So that's where we're getting into the area that this can really damage your hearing. And the increased exposure would be like 30 minutes a day max. So if you think about how often you're around all that equipment that runs at 90 decibels, then we're quickly reaching our threshold of what we should be hearing.
What are some examples of maybe over 90 decibels?
Over 90 decibels, like dynamite and explosions and that kind of thing, gunshots, but also grain dryers are at 110 decibels. So if you think about that in comparison to if you're out shooting for sport mainly, you're probably wearing some type of hearing protection. But, why don't we do that when we're actually working in our occupation day in and day out?
Can being around really loud noises also create pain for those people?
Yes, for sure. So if you are experiencing pain due to the loud noise, then it's definitely at a dangerous level. And that's when you really need to step away from it, put your earplugs in or some type of safety protection. And if you've got little ones around that are covering their ears, that's probably because it's causing them some pain. So they need to have hearing protection as well.
And can there actually be other health issues when it comes to hearing loss?
Absolutely. This is kind of new for me as well to think about how hearing affects our health. And it can cause fatigue, tension, nervousness. It can also increase your pulse rate and damage your heart if you're having hearing issues.
Is it fair to say then that if people aren't able to have a normal level of conversation, maybe things are a little too loud around them?
Absolutely. So if you have to yell at each other when you're around a tractor or machinery, then it is definitely too loud.
Thinking about protecting our hearing, what are things that people can do that don't involve putting something on their head or in their ears?
So really, it's a good idea to keep your equipment well maintained, and then maybe it wouldn't be so loud. Check those belts, check everything that maybe would be making it run a little bit higher. And then working on equipment, maybe out in the open if you can, that would dissipate the noise and spread it out a little bit more. And just limit your exposure and your time to loud noises.
And as we're talking about this, not only thinking about the farmer who are out in it every day, but maybe the younger people who come and join them.
Yes, it's important for everyone to think about their hearing and think about how they can protect that. So, of course, use some type of hearing protection. They have some great different options for children. They're smaller. The earmuff type of hearing protection is really good. And you see that a lot around racetracks. I don't know why we don't see it as much out around farming equipment, but hopefully with a little bit of insight, we can do a little bit better. And also, children mimic what adults do. So if you're wearing hearing protection and you provide some to your child or your grandchild, then they're more likely to wear it as well because they want to be just like you.
What are some of those different hearing protection devices?
There's a couple different ones that I really like. And the acoustical earmuffs are really nice. And they can even be paired with the foam earplugs. And the earmuffs usually reduce noise by about 20 to 30 decibels. And the earplugs alone are 26 to 33 decibels. And so when you can wear those together, it even increases your protection. There are some really nice acoustical earmuffs, and they have like Bluetooth technology, noise canceling. You can talk on the phone. So those are things to think about in the different features that they have. And one other thing that I think is interesting is that they do have earmuffs for kids. And I think the kids like to wear and do what the adults like. And so they will mimic what you do. So if you wear your hearing protection, then they're more likely to wear theirs.
And thinking of safety this time of year on the farm, we've mentioned hearing, but also wanting to take a look into respiratory hazards on the farm and what are a few of those that maybe just get a little forgotten about.
Right. So there's a lot of dust and dirt blowing around. We can see it when you drive by a field and you see everything in the air. And like during harvest, that's when you're harvesting the plants that have been out there that are ready to go. Well, they also contain mold and mycotoxins. And so those little bitty particles can really cause some damage if we inhale those.
As we're talking about respiratory hazards on the farm, there is something that's common enough in farmers that they have their own thing named after them, farmer's lung.
Yes, farmer's lung is a condition by inhaling mold spores. And these mold spores are so minuscule, you could get about 250 1,000 of them on the head of a pin. So a person can really breathe in millions of mold spores when they're out there in a short time. So typically farm workers notice issues in the winter and early spring after they have been working with the silage or the hay that has been stored. So it would be really important for someone to see their doctor if they have experienced a lot of coughing and inflammation after they've been around this type of grain.
What are some protection options?
So again, there's a lot of options out there. There's, the kind of the high-end mask that you can change the cartridges and they fit over your head. Practically no one will probably use something like that on a daily basis. But if you are cleaning out an area where there has been grain storage, then it would be recommended to use something like these air purifying respirators. There's different kinds. You can get anything from like a vapor all the way up to a cartridge that will filter out like feed or grain dust. You could use them in a hog pen or something like that as well. So more than likely, an N95 mask is going to be what would work the best. And they will filter out the mold spores. And so be sure that if you use those, that you replace them on a regular basis because they will get kind of grungy and grimy, and we want them to work the best possible way.
And as we're talking about all these different hazards, not only thinking about the farmers who are doing it, but possibly the younger generation that could also be out there.
So keeping the children safe on the farm, like during harvest when trucks are going in and out, is really important. And we've talked about that before, of just really good communication between who's out in the field and who's at the home, who's in charge of the kids, and that kind of thing. But if the kids are out and around, they want to go out and visit, you guys run out to take a meal out or something, just think about what they're being exposed to. And let's try and protect them as much as we can.
And thinking of exposure, just a reminder that at a certain age, you shouldn't be handling chemicals.
Absolutely. So we do have the KSRE tractor and machinery safety courses that are available for 15 and 16-year-olds. And within that law, it does state that unless you're 16 years old or older, you should not be handling and applying agriculture chemicals. And it's a Federal Insecticide Act that states that anything that is labeled with a skull and crossbones or the words poison or warning, those indicate that someone should not be using them unless they're over 16.
Tawnie, if there's any more questions people have around farm safety related things, where do you recommend they go?
We have a great website, and it will be in the show notes. And then if you want to just go there and visit now, it is at KSU.edu/KASH.
Tawnie, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
That was project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program, Tawnie Larson. You can find out more information on farm safety by going to KSU.edu/KASH. Also, if you'd like to find a way to measure decibels, you can do so by finding an app on your phone, just simply by searching decibel meter. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. September is the best time for overseeding cool season lawns, such as tall fescue or Kentucky bluegrass. K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Riley County, Gregg Eyestone, covers the process for successfully tackling this project. Greg, we're at that time where we're thinking about or maybe even starting doing some lawn work, and as part of that, we're looking at overseeding some of those cool season lawns.
It is. Our soil temperatures are nice for seed germination, and so probably the sooner the better is what I would suggest, just so you can get that grass plant established before we may go into lack of moisture and cold temperatures, which would desiccate or dry out our young plants.
What are the first steps in this process?
Yeah, I think evaluating what's going on there. We do live in Kansas, so it's going to be stressful, but maybe we can figure out what we did wrong. Were we mowing it too short? Did we not water? Are we not fertilizing? So figuring out why the situation is, and again, it may just be Kansas, and that's the way it is. But if we can determine that and fix that, then it'd be beneficial to go ahead and do some overseeding to thicken up our tall fescue grass is what we're talking about, because it doesn't have really rhizomes that will fill in. So we need to plant some more seeds or more plants to get that thick, lush grass that we would like.
This is a little more than just getting out the spreader, right? We're going to have to do a little bit of lawn work.
Yeah, we do need to open up the soil, and so that's typically using a machine that will either cut a hole or pull a plug out so that that seed can come into good contact with the soil. Occasionally, we may have a little bit of thatch layer. Tall fescue is not really prone to that, but you may want to get something to make sure that that seed is getting down to the soil, not just throwing it on top.
So that means verticutting or some core aeration?
Yeah, I like core aeration because that pulls a plug so you get more air circulation down into the root zone. But a lot of people probably are using a machine that cuts a groove in it, like a verticutter or a slicer, and that's just opening up that soil so that seed comes in contact. Either one works really well. The core aerator, you may have to go over the lawn a few more extra times to get good spacing. If you are using a core aerator, which I kind of like, you want to make sure your soil's moist so that you're getting plugs out of the soil and not just kind of going on top of the soil.
Once we've done that, then we need to do the spreading.
Yeah, some machines come with a seeder in it, so you drop the seed in the hole, but other times we just use a mechanical rotary spreader. We can kind of see where the seed is going and making sure we're getting good coverage. And the next process would be watering that seed in so it gets started. If it's a bare soil, you may want to add some straw over that just to reduce your watering practices. But as long as you can keep that seed bed moist, that seeds to germinate, probably 7 to 10 days, you start to see a green fuzz out there.
Well, that watering really is important because you do have to keep it moist.
That's exactly right. You know, you want this kind of to go as quickly as possible. This is kind of like growing a vegetable garden. We're trying to get it done as quick as possible, and so keeping that bed moist is going to get that seed to germinate and grow faster. You know, some people may not have the capacity to do some irrigation. Hopefully nature will take its share of watering practices for us, but just to make it go better for us, an irrigation of some type of system should be used.
Will the seed have some fertilizer in it to begin with?
The seed does have what it needs to grow, but sometimes we, again, want it to grow faster, and so we put down what's often called a starter fertilizer. It's going to have a little bit of phosphorus. Our soil test is going to indicate what we need for that soil and for the grass to grow. But oftentimes a little bit of phosphorus is added because it's more of a readily available for that young, small root system to take up and get a faster plant growing.
You talked about the fuzz, which we like to see, but we also want to make sure that it is tall enough before we mow.
Yeah, you just keep our mowing practices as you would. And so for tall fescue, a good reference is once it gets 3 inches tall, mow it an inch off so it's down to 2 inches. That's going to maybe thicken it up a little bit better. So mowing just as you would your typical lawn is recommended.
And like you say, really no time like the present to get started.
I would. You know, typically we say maybe mid-October would be your last seeding date. That's all based on weather conditions, and we know those are very variable. So the sooner the better, I think, to get that well-established plant going into the winter dormancy.
That's K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Riley County, Gregg Eyestone, with information on overseeding cool season lawns. If you have questions about overseeding your lawn, contact your local county or district extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.